Hi, my name's Victor Tiffany. I'm the co-founder of Revolt Against Plutocracy, the organization that was behind the Bernie or Bust pledge movement of 2016. Donald Trump is President of the United States. He's a climate change denier. And with Scott Pruitt as head of the EPA, we're in trouble. Our climate is already in transition toward a new, potentially species-threatening status. Call it Desert Earth, call it Venus Earth. We are in transition towards something horrible if we don't curb climate change, if we don't figure out a way to preserve the climate and help us hang on until 2016 or 2020 and a new progressive administration that will actually help systematically at a national level transform this fossil fuel sector into sustainable energy systems. Therefore, it's up to us. If we're going to preserve the climate, then we need to take action. I'm going to outline a strategy which will do two things. It'll resist Trump and undermine his efforts to make America great again and help preserve the economy. It's a strategy I call revolutionary consumption. And it's basically simple. I will elaborate on with details after I summarize this. But to give people a quick understanding, in the Twitter age, people have time for 1-hour discussions or monologues. I will just quickly outline. Cut your consumption. If you need to buy something, buy it. If you can make do, don't buy it. This will do two things. It'll reduce your carbon footprint. And this is especially a factor in energy consumption. Turn lights off. Don't travel as far as you're used to. Don't travel at all if you don't need to. Going out to dinner, stay home. Anytime you can cut energy use, turning lights off, television off, directly curbs your carbon footprint, reduces your carbon footprint. But any reduced consumption reduces carbon footprint, whether it's because you're driving to the store or somebody's delivering something to your home. That's energy that can be saved by not buying new stuff. The other thing that will do is slow the economy down. Right? The more people who are involved with this, the more we'll slow it down. And the idea is to undermine Trump's ability to make America great again. And that's going to be decided upon one factor: how the economy performs under Donald Trump. If we cut our consumption, the economy is based on effective demand. Right? If you go out and buy things, you're going to help stimulate the economy. If we consciously and conscientiously decide to curb our consumption, buy less, only buy what we truly need, then we'll slow the economy. And that will be reflected in the midterm elections. If the economy's on a downturn, people are going to say, whoa, this president isn't working so well. Or in his re-election bid, assuming he gets that far, and this is true for Mike Pence as well, if he ends up being the president, voters are more likely to lean toward alternatives, progressive alternatives, if they can lay out a strategy that will both increase jobs and transform the energy sector of our economy into sustainable energy systems. So, details. The more money you make, the better your standard of living, the more you can do to resist Trump. Poor people already only spend for what they need. That's all they can afford. Working class and middle class Americans can have dozens of ways that they can curb their consumption. If you have something that works, make do. If you drive a gas guzzler, don't go out and buy a new vehicle just because you want to reduce your gas consumption, because that increases your carbon footprint. When your vehicle, your gas guzzler, no longer is good enough because you're spending more money repairing it every month than it would cost to purchase a new car, then buy a Prius or an electric car, or any gas sipping vehicle, that's the time to finally do it, because you need it at that point. If you total a vehicle, then go ahead and purchase a high mileage vehicle to replace it. Again, you have to be smart here. We can't just think we're doing the right thing that turns out to be the wrong thing. When we cut our consumption, we will reduce the GDP. Now that's going to cause people to lose their jobs. And one way to counter that is through what I call targeted consumption. Economist Joseph Schumpeter talked about creative destruction, which has gone on throughout history. The people who used to make sails for merchant ships lost their jobs when the steam engine was put into position and created and installed on ships. They lost their jobs when the internal combustion engine was installed on merchant ships. So the idea is we want to creatively target consumption for green energy and get people employed installing solar systems on rooftops, small windmills on rooftops, geothermal systems on the property. Again, this is for homeowners. Renters basically are going to be at the forefront of constraining consumption. The most they could do really is replace gas guzzlers with sipping vehicles. And I'm not talking about the purchase of used equipment, used clothing, used furniture, used cars. Right? This is about cutting demand for new consumer stuff. That's how we adversely affect the economy. So there's a strategy, a larger strategy that people need to pay attention to. When 1,000 people are radically cutting their consumption, it's not going to put a ripple in the overall national economy. When 10,000 people radically reduce their consumption, then it's going to ripple. It'll slow economic growth, but it won't put economy into a downturn. It won't cause the GDP to shrink, and that's what we're aiming to do. When 100,000 people radically reduce their consumption, then we're looking at the potential of turning the economy, slowing the economy down, and reducing GDP. So we need to pay attention to the quarterly GDP reports, because what we do not want to do is crash the economy. We don't want to drive the national economy into a ditch. While that would be bad for Donald Trump and better for the climate, it would be horrible for the millions of people who would be thrown out of work and thrown out of their homes. Right? We don't want a repeat of the crash of 2008. We don't want a repeat of the Great Recession. We want to be basically human regulators, cut our consumption, reduce the economy, and slow the economy. It'll undermine Trump and help preserve the environment, the climate. If, as we continue to recruit more people to cut consumption, we see the GDP decline 2 quarters in a row, then we have enough people in our movement, and we need to spend some of the money we've saved over the last 2 quarters in order to produce slight amount of economic growth. We don't want to cause a recession. We just want to keep growth largely negative. So we want to have 1 quarter of growth, 2 quarters of decline. 1 quarter of growth, 2 quarters of decline, to serve as a governor on the economy, keeping it slowed down. We're going to serve as a brake on the economy and slow it down to undermine Trump and help preserve the climate until a national policy can be put in place. Now, there are things that can be done at the state level. In blue states, where a Democratic governor and a Democratic legislature might be open to large-scale green energy projects, that's the place to attempt to establish experiments in large-scale transformation of the energy sector from fossil fuels to green. The technology to resurface roads with solar cells is in place. It's, as I said in Philadelphia outside during the Bernier Bus Rally, all the technology needed to transform the economy is off the shelf. We can do this. We just need the political will, and we can demand in blue states where the possibility is there to resurface roads with these solar collectors. Right? This will do so much to advance the cause of alternative energy sources. Roads would require less service. You don't have to, they're self-heating, so you don't have to salt them in the wintertime. You don't have to plow them in the wintertime. People will have fewer accidents, so insurance costs will go down. The upfront cost is huge, right? My idea of this is to use a bond act to fund this thing, several $billion to get it started. And as these solar roads go into service, the state will have energy to sell the utility companies. That money, that income, can be used to continue to build more solar roads until every road in a state is covered with solar collectors, at which point the state will have enormous income from the sale of that energy to the utility companies to help maintain the cost of these roads, because, you know, these, like any road, they will be damaged from accidents and heavy trucks and so forth. And it'll also provide income for education and other advancements of energy transformation. So that there are things we can do to promote in blue states energy sector transformation. Now, one more point I want to address, and that's the upcoming People's Climate Movement March on Washington, April 29th. While it's hard to argue against marches for the climate and climate preservation marches on D.C., is it really smart to pull people in from around the country for a centralized national march on Washington? I'm not against a march on Washington, but I think the Women's March, the day after the inauguration, serves as a role model for what can be done going forward that will reduce people, you know, the energy used in order to pull people from around the country into a central location for a large rally. I'm all for large rallies, but it makes more sense to me to have a rally in Washington using or pulling in people from the greater Washington, Baltimore area for a large rally on the Washington Mall or wherever they have it, and then another rally in New York City. I'll just use New York State as an example. In Syracuse, in Binghamton, in Buffalo, to decentralize these marches but coordinate them so that they become as newsworthy as the Women's March was. This will reduce our carbon footprint as we organize more and more marches and rallies. And as we resist Trump in general, that's an opportunity to promote this idea of revolutionary consumption. Right? If you want to undermine Donald Trump, spread the word. Share this video on social media. Share this idea at Trump actions, whether you're an airport supporting refugees trying to come into the country, or you're at a march for the environment, or a march of the scientists opposing Trump. Anytime you're in an organized effort to oppose Trump, you can help promote revolutionary consumption. But it's important to stress, keep your eye on the GDP reports, the quarterly GDP reports, and don't send the economy into a crash. If you want to consume and you're a homeowner, build energy systems onto your house. That's a way to creatively destroy the fossil fuel sector of the economy until we have a progressive in the White House who can undertake this on a national scale. That's our best approach towards saving the economy. Thank you for listening, and let's do this. Let's stop Donald Trump and save the world.